Welcome to Norse Code, the number one podcast for your Minnesota Vikings. I'm your host producer. My name is James Pagashnik. Thank you guys so much for listening. And at the other end of the tin cannon string, we have our analyst and co-host. You know him from numerous blogs and podcasts around the internet, most notably from the Wide Left Substack. He is Mr. Useful Human, Arif Hassan. Arif, it was comforting to see that Aaron Rodgers was able to make it past 4 snaps tonight, but I just don't think that the Jets have it in them to be useful or good this year.
Yeah, it's really cool that the Jets found a way to in a very Vikings sense, build up hope in 2 consecutive seasons, only to extinguish it so early on. The Jets had a great team last year, minus that quarterback situation. And this year, it seems like, maybe not. Maybe they should probably have paid that pass rusher they traded for.
Yeah, well, they didn't have the worst weekend of the NFL season, week 1, but you can't say that they were happy. And it was nice to see Aaron Rodgers was playing the hits again. Had that nice pass on the free play to Lazard. Again, good to see that he was playing the hits and that he looked. I actually think he crossed the line from being disappointed to mad at a receiver for dropping. So
actually, that receiver was Alan Lazard.
It was,
which is great.
Of all people to get 2 touchdown passes, I think it was telling Jenna too, is the fact that Alan Lazard caught 2 touchdown passes, one of which was not from Aaron Rodgers tonight.
Yes, from Tyrod Taylor.
Made me feel pretty good about the Jets season. So I was enjoying that. But around the time that you're making Brock Purdy look good, I don't know, man. And there's news coming out now that, and it hasn't been completely verified, but that the 49ers knew on Friday that McCaffrey wasn't going to be playing. So
I stuck around for a little bit of the post-game interview with, I think the name is Jordan Mason, the undrafted running back. And the sideline reporter asked him, hey, so when did you know you were starting? And I think a lot of us expected the answer, 30 minutes before the game. But he said he found out on Friday. So that's where that comes from, is him saying that he found out that he was going to start on Friday.
That's, I feel like that's both in the spirit of the law and against the law. There's some fun stuff that can happen if that is accurate. But
right, he could have let a family member know. They could have let someone else know. They could have put a bunch of money on Jordan Mason overs.
Yeah,
who's to say? Yeah,
let's not look into that and just enjoy the fact that they have a very good backup running back there now. Jeez, and we'll move on to a review of the Giants game here in just a moment. It is a victory Monday night. Sure, it's still Monday night for another hour. Welcome to this episode of Norse Code. Hope you guys are all doing well. The Vikings won in decisive fashion. They have not had a victory of this nature, of this amount, really, since the 2019 game against the Chargers, where the Vikings took over the stadium 80 to 10%, or 80 to 20%, 90 to 10%.
That is correct. Yeah. The Vikings
that was a
have
fun
just
game to watch.
not been on the winning end of a multi-score game, or actually been in that many multi-score games in a long, long time. And mind you, they've been in dominant wins where the score doesn't look dominant, where there have been backdoor covers that turn into 1-score games, a 20-13 game or something like that, 21-13. So it's not as if they haven't looked good or in control of an entire game, but this is the first time in 5 years where
they didn't play down.
Such a stupid.
They didn't play down to a terrible team. And it's not that they haven't played terrible teams in the past 5 years. They played a ton of them. They just played
number of them.
Yeah, they just played down to them. They didn't play down to them.
The Jeff Saturday Colts, the new look Antonio Pierce Raiders, both terrible, terrible teams that they had to play to once go. They had to engineer the greatest comeback of all time against the Colts, and they had to manage, to switch out their quarterback at halftime against the Raiders to manage a field goal win, 3-0. Yeah, it's nice. And it's like, there's like all kinds of things that you can qualify this with. And the qualifications are accurate, of course, right? Like, this is not a good team. Daniel Jones is not a good quarterback. Like, this is the expected result. And like, yeah, that's all true, right? And week 1 is weird. That's all true. But it hasn't happened for like 5 years. It's nice. It's nice.
Somebody had posted about, like, because I had posted, I don't know anything that this game proves about Minnesota, but we do know that the New York Giants are butt. And somebody went, well, good teams beat bad teams. And I went, I mean, yes, but that just hasn't been the case.
That's not really relevant here.
That's just not something Minnesota does. But anyway. So Vikings 1, we'll be discussing that in just a moment, and we'll be doing the mailbag as well. But again, thank you guys so much for listening to Norse Code. If you enjoy the show, would like to help us out financially, you can do so in a couple of different ways. You can go over to patreon.com/NorseCode, and for $3.50 a month, you get access to the bonus materials, which another episode will be coming out here shortly, and you get access to the Discord, all of that. Special thank you to Nick Stenerson. Thank you so much for supporting us over on Patreon. You can also do paypal.me/NorseCode as well for a one-time donation, or you can go to norsecode.threadless.com and pick up any number of wonderful Norse Code merchandise items, including shirts, flags, baby onesies are popular, shower curtains. I think they even have like a dish towel too. I think that's what we need. We need Norse Code like tea towels to give out at the next live show.
Oh, that sounds nice. Actually, it's like a little gift bag, put in a little tea towel.
Maybe a couple wigglers.
Yeah, I mean, that's all wholesome. It's not nearly as weird as the bath mats or the shower curtains.
I think really the next live show, I think I will also be giving away a shower curtain, but we'll figure that out. And we'll figure out the live show situation. And I will not be going to London. Arif will be.
Not happening in London.
Nope.
Yeah.
Arif will be going to London. He has said that he wants to meet some of you crazy people. So if you're interested in buying Arif a drink, not my words, not his, email him.
Right. Yeah, we can set something up. Yeah, we can like put together like a group email, which I'm sure won't be torturous to set up or organize. Honestly, what I would prefer is that if there are people interested in this, a bunch of people email me, and then someone just takes charge and organizes it instead of me. So that sounds ideal.
Like everything I've been involved with in this show.
Hey, you're a producer. That's just how it works. And frankly, I've gotten used to this treatment. So here we are. No,
so it's my fault. It's my fault.
Yes.
Okay, whatever.
Yeah, okay. You remember when that kid tried to get off in trial because he had affluenza? He was too rich to understand the consequences of his actions.
Yeah, Arif the affluent. Okay, yeah, I got it.
It's like logistics-awenza, right? Where someone just handling all the logistics. I will say though, I'm going to be in Europe for 2 weeks because I've decided that this is actually, I might as well have friends in the British Isles, right? So I will be, for the first week, I will be in Northern Ireland visiting friends. But for a portion, so I think on the 25th, I will be in Dublin for the Irish NFL show, which is going to be fun, like with Mark McQuaid, and it's going to be a ton of fun. We haven't figured out a venue yet. I'll let you know. But yeah, so I'm going to be in Dublin on the 25th for a show. And then next week, obviously not that week, but next week is the game because they play the Jets on the 6th. And we'll figure out, something to do in London as a group then. But yeah, it's going to be fun. I still don't know what my angle is going to be on a story. Like when the Saints and the Vikings played each other, like I had my angle figured out months in advance. I was like, Saints and Vikings, I'm going to go up to the first monastery that the Vikings attacked and make the story about that. And that ruled, and I loved it. And now it's just like, well, what, Jets? That's not...
This is your chance to do an expose on the death of Concord and Ziggy Wolf's role in it. So, did he have a role? We don't know. We'll have to find out.
It seems unlikely. A real estate mogul.
Well, it's worth.
I'll do some on the boots investigative reporting on Ziggy Wolf's role in the death of the Concorde.
This is. I'm making it worse. I'm only making your affluenza worse. Damn it. All right. So, all of that, welcome to this episode of Norse Code. Let's get into the show itself. And again, the Vikings destroyed the Giants. The Giants did not score an offensive touchdown. Worth noting, I'm of the belief that they may have had the worst week or worst weekend of the season. Sure, Green Bay lost their quarterback for 3 to 6 weeks, but the Giants proceeded to watch Saquon Barkley score 3 touchdowns. 3 offensive touchdowns to the Giants 0. Also, I believe that there was an interception too from a former Giant. So, like, there's all sorts of fun stuff for the Giants this week, and they had brought out everyone. Do you see their list of people they brought out for their 100-year celebration? They all came in to watch the Giants lay a giant egg.
That is rough.
The smartest person was his name is escaping me. Apologies. Smartest person was the guy who was still on Strahan, who said, I was invited. I couldn't make it. I got a day job. I couldn't go. It's like, you are the smartest man for not witnessing that in person.
I mean, he does have to wake up at like 3 a.m. for Today or whatever the show is called, right? Like he's got like a national morning show.
Yeah, he's got stuff to do, but in New York or whatever. But yeah, so they brought in everybody for this, and the Boo Birds were out within the first 5 minutes. The Giants looked awful. The Vikings looked very competent, albeit C.J. Ham broke my heart for the first, his first catch of the year. But this was good, and it answered a couple of questions as to what was possible for the Vikings offense this year.
Yeah, no, it's so that was kind of the direction my story after the game took, is that there's like a lot of kind of hope embedded here. We'll talk about the shotgun in a second, don't worry. But there's like a lot of hope embedded in here, and there's a way for us to kind of understand, what a successful Vikings, team is going to look like. And so on offense, a lot of that's going to look like, maybe Josh Oliver gets a little bit more involved in these seam shots. So what happened, for example, on the second drive of the game where Sam Darnold hit Josh Oliver up the seam for a 22-yard catch, it felt like, this is kind of the guy that the Vikings envisioned when they signed him in free agency of last year. Somebody that they said was, he was like a pass catcher in college. He turned into a blocking tight end in the NFL. We think that the premier athleticism and the pass catching talent that he had in college might still translate in the NFL. So we're going to see if we can get him involved. We didn't see that at all last year, right? Even after TJ Hawkinson went down. This year, we're seeing him kind of go up. And what was great is that this was a situation where they lined up Josh Oliver on the opposite side of Justin Jefferson, who was in the slot. And so if the Giants were in like a Tampa 2 coverage or something like that, or if they were in a single high safety coverage, they would have that kind of middle of the field player probably angled towards Jefferson's side. And if that's the case, it gives you a little bit of a window to throw to Josh Oliver. And it turned out to be a Tampa 2. So the linebacker had to create depth. And because he was creating depth at an angle towards Jefferson, assuming that Jefferson might try to run a post route or something like that, that left Josh Oliver up the seam pretty open. So he was able to hit him, right? And it's just like stuff like that we're going to be able to see throughout the season. Jordan Addison, before he left the game due to an ankle injury, played a really big role in that offense. He looked really good those first couple of drives, which was nice. And there's a lot of ways that they're getting him involved in the offense. Like last year, he was primarily a deep threat. In just those drives, we saw him get targeted in a variety of places. So that was pretty nice. I think that the most refreshing thing, maybe not the most valuable thing or important thing to the offense, but the most refreshing thing was seeing this run game come alive. Like Aaron Jones, I think he finished with like 6.8 yards a carry. That was brought down a little bit by some runs later in the game. He was averaging like 7 earlier on. It was 7 yards a carry. And it's not as if his average went down that much, right? 7 to 6.8. He had a long run late too, when everyone knew that the Vikings were going to run the ball to milk the clock. He just kind of had it. And it felt like it was Dalvin Cook from several years ago, where, here's a running back going to, the sideline, trying to turn the corner and beat like a defensive back to the edge, a cornerback, a guy that might run a 4-3. Right. And Aaron Jones beats him to the corner. We haven't seen Dalvin Cook do that in years. Obviously didn't see Alexander Madison do that last year. It allowed you to actually run outside zone or bounce an inside run to the outside and still feel like you could gain yards there. Not that he needed to bounce all that often because he was able to run up the middle. And I feel kind of validated that I thought the Vikings run blocking was actually fine last year. We saw that in this game. The run blocking was pretty good. He was able to take advantage of it. And it's nice to see a running game. Like, yeah, the running game is not as important as the passing game. And the running game is primarily built around the offensive line, but you can kind of see when a running back is not sufficient enough. There is a point at which, running backs do matter. Having a talented back there is going to have an impact if the alternative is somebody who just doesn't have, the capacity to turn those blocks into actual, big gains. And so the Vikings saw that. So that was really nice, right? So we haven't seen, this offense fully come online yet. TJ Hawkinson isn't, healthy yet. And obviously Addison was hurt for the most of the game. Jefferson wasn't as involved as you'd expect him to be, although up 3 scores, you're probably not throwing the ball that much. So he wasn't able to hit 80 yards or whatever I think a lot of people were hoping for.
Still got a touchdown. Still had a great catch to the side or to the sideline.
The 44-yarder was fantastic. My God. Great, I mean, first of all, great throw. Like initially, just like the first takeaway from that is what a dot. What a great throw from Sam Darnold. But great catch. I thought the slant for the touchdown was a fantastic catch. It was like classic, he's going to win his contested catches. That's who he is.
Single coverage on that touchdown. That was a choice.
Yeah, mistakes were made.
He wanted that guy. That guy went into the media and said, "I want a challenge. I want this. I want one-on-one with Jefferson." It felt
he
very
did.
much.
Yeah, he did.
It felt very much like one of those. You know what? Haters were right. Good call on the haters sort of moment.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, hater said I couldn't do it. Yeah, that was nice. So I thought that the offense generally looked good. I think there are concerns about the offensive line. What was great, though, is that there wasn't a lot of edge pressure, right? So we saw Christian Darrisaw, who got hit with a penalty. I think that they called the wrong player on that penalty. They called the wrong jersey name, I think. I think it was on a screen pass anyway, so it's not really relevant to the pass protection conversation. But it was like a penalty on 71, and they did the replay, and it was like, that's not holding. What is that? But I do think there was holding on the play. I think it just wasn't 71. So that was kind of annoying. But, Darrisaw, and Brian O'Neill both did an excellent job against an edge rusher duo that should be doing a lot better. Kayvon Thibodeau, highly drafted, did all right, his rookie year, and people were kind of expecting a big breakout this year. I thought people were overrating his rookie year, but I fully expected him to be pretty talented, entering this year. And then Brian Burns, who had been in the middle of a contract negotiation for what felt like forever with the Panthers before he got traded. And a lot of people expected him to make, top 5 edge rusher money. And so he was supposed to help unlock Thibodeau. He was supposed to, be a force, unto himself, and nothing, no edge pressure from either of those guys. Mind you, Dexter Lawrence is who he is and is an untamable beast. It's incredible what he was able to do. The Giants players logged 11 total pressures, which is not that much, but the Vikings did not pass the ball that often because they were up by so much. So that's part of it, is that there just weren't that many pass protection snaps, something like 19 dropbacks. I don't remember. It was just not that many. But 11 pressures were logged by Giants defenders. 6 of them were from Dexter Lawrence, the nose tackle, which is a testament to how good he is. I mean, I think Brett Coleman did a video on him 2 years ago, where he sits. He's so good at these visuals. He sits down on a bench in a park, and you can see, just a part of the New York City skyline in the background. And it turns out the buildings that he chose perfectly map onto a chart of total pressures from nose tackles. And it's Dexter Lawrence just way up here, right? Just way the hell all the way up there at 34 for the season. And then the next nose tackle has 8, maybe 6. It's I don't know if those are the actual numbers. It might have been 46 and 12 or so, but the gap is that significant, right? And that's who he was the year following that video. There was no Coleman curse, which is pretty rare. And then it's happening this year too. So testament to him, but also 6 pressures in a game is a lot no matter who it is. And that's a problem that you got to solve, especially on only, 19 or however many dropbacks there were, right? Like if a guy gets 6 pressures in a game, over 17 games, it's 102 pressures, which in some years leads the league in pressures. I don't mean among nose tackles. I don't even mean among defensive tackles. I mean, period. Right? Like that's like I think the year that like Danielle Hunter led the league alongside Zachariah Smith. He had like 119 something. It's a very close to just what an edge rusher gets. It's incredible. I think Myles Garrett had 109 one of the years he was leading. Like it's 102. So you can't allow a nose tackle, no matter how good they are, to get 6 pressures against you, especially when you only have half as many passing dropbacks as like what was typical, in week 1, right? A lot of people had like 35, right? And so if you allowed 9 pressures, like that's to one guy, that's crazy. So that's an Ed Ingram problem. That's a Garrett Bradbury problem. Didn't happen too much with Blake Brandel. I still think that there were moments where he was at fault, but PFF disagrees. They gave him like the top grade in the game. So, probably like you can disagree with PFF grades. It's unlikely, right, that a lot of them were his fault. Like the disagreement is probably on one play here or there. So just keep that in mind. That is, and if Randall wasn't up against Lawrence all that often, which may or may not be the case, I don't know. Then that question hasn't been answered yet because the rest of that interior group for the Giants, if you remember our interview with Dave, is not that impressive. So there's still a little bit more to learn about from him. Plus, there were a couple of mistakes that I think were unrelated to pressures given up that are worth being cautious about. But yeah, I mean, the offense looks good. It was against a bad team. So, to be continued against a great team next week. But right now, the offense looks good. There's a lot of possibility. There's a lot of ways that they can attack defenses. That's nice. That's fun. And Sam Darnold, didn't talk about him. MVP, right?
Definitely worth talking about. His composure was moving around a little bit and was able to be effective and manage. He was managing out there and taking a couple of shots when he needed to.
Yeah, I think Kevin O'Connell and Kwesi, they have a type at quarterback, and the type involves a couple of things, but one of the ones that like sticks out to me is a guy that just stands tall in the pocket and absorbs a hit when he needs to and gets rid of the ball. Like there are a lot of quarterbacks that lean away from pressure. And I've talked about this a couple of times. One reason I didn't like Jimmy Garoppolo coming out of Eastern Illinois. One reason I was a little bit concerned about Derek Carr, although I thought this was a lot less of a concern for him than it was Garoppolo. One reason I liked Teddy. There are quarterbacks that just like leaning away from pressure, which, by the way, I mean, all of football is like fighting a bunch of natural instincts that you have in split-second moments, right? Like a lot of the penalties that refs will throw are like, you have to not do what is completely natural for you to do and make that decision in a split second. And the things that separate like great players from good ones are also those things where it's like, hey, there are hundreds of thousands of years of evolution telling you that you probably don't want to be hit by this 320-pound person going 18 miles an hour. That seems bad, and evolution is telling you correctly that you should avoid that. And the rare ability to be like, I got to make this throw. Sorry. Is something that clearly the Vikings prize because they keep on acquiring quarterbacks that have that. It's like one thing to kind of take a lot of hits, like Jaden Daniels takes a lot of hits, and it's one thing to kind of absorb those hits as they become necessary for the construction of the play, like JJ McCarthy does, like Sam Darnold did and it's kind of weird to be praising him for a quality where he threw an interception, but like that's what he did on the interception. He throws through pressure as Dexter Lawrence is bearing down on him. Now, Lawrence does impact the throw that causes the pick. I wouldn't argue that that's Darnold's fault. You can always say, hey, there are a couple of things that maybe you could have done better here. But I think primarily that this is a positive rep, despite it ending in an interception. And he does this. He just does this. He stands tall in the pocket and he takes hits, but he doesn't invite pressure. He doesn't, like, both McCarthy and Darnold, and honestly, and this is not something Cousins ever got praise for, including from me that often, navigating the pocket so that you don't have to take those when you do, but not letting fear alter your actions, rather just trying to pick the optimal solution rather than being afraid of getting hit. I mean, we all know Cousins wasn't afraid of getting hit, but like one thing that he definitely improved on in his last 2 years with the Vikings, and honestly showed up in spots, in the Zimmer era, was the kind of pocket manipulation to move around in the pocket and avoid a little bit of pressure, which is why Cousins had such a long time to throw, but not as high of a sack rate as you'd expect from his time to throw, along with all of the play action in his history. We'll talk about him more in a second, but this is just, I think it's a quality that KOC and maybe Kwesi really highly value. They might overvalue it, I don't know, but like from an aesthetic standpoint, it is nice to see a guy just take a hit because he wants to make the play. Like maybe that's maybe kind of like how finishing is overrated in an evaluation of an offensive lineman. Yes, it's good. Yes, it's important. I tend to find that teams over leverage for it, and consistency is something that they should be more aware of relative to finishing. This could be one of those qualities, but I get why it rules to see a guy willing to absorb that kind of pressure to just make the throw. And sometimes the throw is a 3-yard check down. That time he tried like a 40-yarder, right? I get it. But yeah, I mean, he did that. He manipulated the pocket relatively well. His movement was pretty good in the pocket. He is a pretty decent athlete, so we got to see him make a couple of yards on the ground, I think 3 when he scrambled out of pressure. Really good. But like what really stands out, I think one of the issues that Darnold had coming out of USC, and I think he only had like 13 starts at USC. He was like one of those guys that just didn't have a ton of tape. But coming out of USC, and then we saw a little bit with the Jets, is that he was too aggressive. His risk-reward calculus was a little bit off. And that's something that's always really difficult for quarterbacks to tune, like what kind of risks they want to take, because it's so easy to become overly cautious. And out of fear of throwing an interception, just kind of take a check down when really you could have thrown it a little bit deeper. The thing that Cousins was criticized for, but honestly didn't actually happen all that much in his career, the things that plagued somebody like a Christian Ponder, right? The ability to kind of modulate that aggression. I don't know that he had that at USC. I don't really think that he had that with New York. It seems like, one game sample, seems like he did a pretty good job of figuring out when risk and reward would work, because he was taking checkdowns, throughout the game. There were moments where he's taking checkdowns, time in the pocket, scanning the field, all that. Like, I feel like if I were to compare a skill that, like, I think Darnold is probably a better quarterback than McCarthy is right now. I think I think he's probably more consistent. I will say, I think that McCarthy might, when he's more used to the offense, process the field a little bit faster, read things a little bit faster. Darnold was not maybe ultra quick processing, but still got through a bunch of reads before getting to his checkdowns. Really efficient day. Led the league in completion percentage over expected this weekend. I didn't look at the numbers after Monday Night Football, but after watching the game, pretty confident neither of those two quarterbacks are going to be challenging him for the title.
It did resemble a number of the good games he had in Carolina, where he looked like he was turning it around, like right when he first got there. Like, it looked good. It was comforting.
It was in
to
control.
See.
Yeah, it was in control. And that drive, my God, the 99-yard drive, which is what my piece centers around over at Wide Left.
Yes,
that 99-yard drive was divine. The offense drove 105 yards, right? Because they had a 5-yard penalty, or 104 yards, I guess. But like, it's not just that, like, it's not just the fact of having a 99-yard drive. That's nice to have in your back pocket that you did that. Great. It's how Darnold, I think he looked better in that drive than he did throughout the rest of the game. And he didn't look bad throughout the rest of the game. He looked good. But that drive, where he was just in rhythm, in control, perfect timing, just like he knew exactly where he wanted to go with the ball, and without hesitation would go there, if it seemed at all possible. So that's like ideal quarterbacking, right? Like that's pod racing, baby. Like it was great.
And especially in the way that that whole thing ended with using Jefferson as a fake, using him as a distraction while you were able to throw it up to Naylor. Like he ended up drawing 2-3 defenders just by standing around, by making a fake move, looking like it was going to be a screen. Like it worked perfectly. Like he just sat there, and I just remember sitting there and like pausing the game afterwards and went, that play worked exactly the way they wanted it to. Every part of that play, from the way that it like broke down to the screen to the defenders running, everything worked the way they wanted it to. That was
and
so nice.
And I think this it was fantastic. And I think this says something about Kevin O'Connell too. Like O'Connell has received a lot of praise over the past 2 years of being a really excellent offensive head coach and a really great play designer and really good quarterback coach. And I never pushed back against it because I didn't think that there was any evidence to suggest otherwise. And after, the Joshua Dobbs game, the first one, it's really hard to argue against it, right? Like, holy crap, I can't believe he did that. One of the best coached games ever, right? And it was Joshua Dobbs that got it. And so like there was a fair amount of evidence, but I just didn't think that we had enough. Like I think that there was a lot of like, he's got the reputation with McVay, his public appearances are always very friendly with the media. He obviously knows what he's talking about. That's never a question. But like he lends himself well to that perception. And I don't know that there was necessarily a ton of overwhelming evidence. Like if you were to pick one, is he a really good offensive head coach or is he just an average one? You'd probably lean really good, but I didn't want to make any definitive statements about how good he was outside of those moments like in that Dobbs game, right? Because I also remember the Denver game where he tried to do the read option with Dobbs and it was a disaster, right? And I thought that like a lot of his offensive reputation was built around, you've already got a really efficient quarterback in Kirk Cousins, and you've unlocked something that I think is good coaching, but it's not necessarily good like play calling or offensive design. And that's getting Cousins to trust his improvisational capability, right? That's really good coaching. That's the sign of a good coach. So I'm not taking anything away when I say that is not offensive play design or play calling. That's a great thing to have as a coach. It's just in a different bucket than offensive design, in my opinion. So I didn't think we actually had a great amount of evidence to suggest he was really good at play design. Again, more evidence than any other category of coach. I just think that we were kind of in a holding pattern. I think we're seeing that evidence. Like in this game, now you've got like the sixth quarterback that he's coached in a Vikings uniform. This is happening a lot to the Vikings, I feel like, right? Like, Mike Zimmer complains about having to go through all these quarterbacks, and then he finally gets an Iron Man and he just hates the guy, which fair enough, I guess. But like,
that's a Zimmer thing. Yeah.
Yeah. But like, Zimmer went through like 19 quarterbacks. That's clearly an exaggeration, but he went through a ton of quarterbacks, finally gets one quarterback, doesn't like the guy. Okay, fine. KOC gets the same guy, the Iron Man, and now can't benefit from that. And so he has 4 starting quarterbacks in the same season, switches to a new starting quarterback, in this season with the optionality at least at the beginning of the preseason to, potentially go to the rookie, right? Okay, well, now that he's gone through like 5-6 quarterbacks, like and seeing kind of how he adjusts what the offense is going to do in response to that, like there's like a pretty good argument to be had here that like this guy knows what he's doing and he's one of the best in the league to do it. And I think this game is giving us a little bit more evidence in that regard. Now, again, next week, much more realistic test, but in terms of like week 1 reactions, I think we've got overreactions and then we've got takeaways. I think this is closer to takeaway. I'm pretty happy with that.
Yeah, this game turned out about as well as we could have hoped for the 4th preseason game. This worked out fairly well.
It really felt like that for a lot of teams, huh?
Yeah, well, a lot of them actually, based on the number of yards the kickers were kicking, and for Boswell and Arif beat me with Boswell this week, and I'm a little annoyed.
It was a team effort. I also beat you with whoever the Saints kicker is. Group A? I don't know. It's like a German word.
Yeah, that. So, but based on the number of passing yards, based on the number of rookie quarterbacks playing this week, there was some not great quarterback play for week 1, which we'll talk about in just a little bit. But
we'll talk about it in a second. But I do want to add this one stat before we move on to the other side of the ball, which is entering Monday Night Football, the average quarterback passing yardage was 185, and I think it's pretty clear from Monday Night Football where Aaron Rodgers got like 167 or something like that. And Brock Purdy had 231. I know because I had the over at 236.5. I thought the game would be a little closer. But I don't think that changes the averages all that meaningfully. So it's 185 basically.
Yeah. This was a fun game on offense, especially to watch. The Vikings were effective on through the air. Naylor was able to move in. Addison had a couple of great catches. Let's talk a bit about the defense, specifically that wonderful pick 6 by Van Ginkel, who, by the way, it has been noted online that Daniel Jones has thrown for more pick 6s than offensive touchdowns since he signed his extension. Now, it's also because he went out after game 6 last year.
Yeah, but that's
still
rough.
That's rough. Van Ginkel got that great pick 6, was in just the right spot. And my favorite part of that whole thing was, all the defensive players swarm him. They go to the sidelines, the camera's on him, and I forget the name of the defender, but he goes, oh my God, his hands on his face and everything.
That was so good. And the microphone picked it up. It was so good.
It looked a lot like that meme of the
kid roasting the other kid.
Yeah, the kids roasting, or the African Americans watching magic tricks. And
oh my God,
hand
that's
on
so
face,
funny.
just going past the screen. It looked like that.
Yeah. Oh my God, that's such a good set of videos.
And
especially the ones with the fake David Blaine. Sorry,
yes. I absolutely, I know exactly what you're talking about. So I'm gonna get roasted if I don't mention this. Van Ginkel, out of nowhere, good for him.
Good for him. Sam mentioned this on the Minnesota Football Party. Something I found out later when I logged into NFL Pro. The new advanced stats database that the NFL is offering NFL Plus subscribers. It's really good. I'm not sponsored to say, now that I'm accepting sponsorships, I'm not sponsored to say that. That was the quickest pick 6 or quickest interception. I think it might have been the quickest interception in the NFL since Van Ginkel did it last year.
What a wonderful record to hold, and what a wonderful record to break.
Yeah, it's a meaningless, stupid stat. I love it. It doesn't tell you anything except that it happened while rushing the passer, right? That's the only way that's possible. It's 1.67 seconds or something crazy like that. But just what beautiful, right? And man, he was ready, right? That's the crazy part. It's he expected to have a pick 6, it felt like. The rest of us were like, hey, what's he doing with the ball in the end zone? Didn't the snap just happen? That's crazy. And he was like, yeah, I was meant to be here. I saw it in the vision. It was like, what in the world?
Yes.
But no, he had a really wonderful game. Because in addition to that, he had a bunch of great run stops. He had a little bit of pressure. He had a quarterback hit before that. I don't know. He was doing everything. And the Vikings, when they signed him, it indicated that, they see him as more than just a pass rusher. They see him as a true 3-4 type outside linebacker. Not that the Vikings or any other team runs a true 3-4, but rather that his skill set kind of matches that, in that you can drop him into coverage. You can kind of put him into kind of the stack linebacker area, in the box as a linebacker if you need to, which we're seeing a little bit. I know that in run looks, the Raiders will sometimes have Max Crosby stand up and be a run defender, and it actually is really effective. It seems like a stupid idea and it works. So that's nice. But but yeah, I mean, like Van Ginkel is meant to be able to kind of do a lot of different things. And in the very first game, he does a lot of different things. And it like matches the ethos of like this Flores defense where it's like, we're trying to get as many hybrid people as possible. And that, sometimes that doesn't necessarily like work out, right? Like I think Jay Ward is supposed to be kind of one of these hybrid kind of guys. He's not that good. There's a high risk that if you can do a lot of things, you can't do any of them particularly well. But every so often you end up with like a Josh Metellus or an Andrew Van Ginkel, and they're doing really incredible stuff in their like kind of amoeba-ish roles. Van Ginkel ends up as, I think, the player of the game here. He was incredible. So the pick six, I think before that, he was probably the player of the game, right? Like, somebody might have said like, hey, you give it to Darnold. He's the quarterback. There's a lot on his shoulders. The injury to, McCarthy could have put a bit of bigger spotlight on him. And it'd be nice to give him the week one player of the game, whatever. And, he played well enough to deserve it. And that's all true. But I think Van Ginkel was probably the best player before that pick six. And then that happened. And you're like, well, it's yours, man. Good job.
Absolutely. And just for fun, because I have the stats up here, 5 sacks. Harrison Phillips got 1. Pat Jones got 2. Ginkel got 1, and Dallas Turner got 1. And that Turner one looked so good.
The Turner one was nice. The Turner one was really nice. Like he only got 20 odd snaps. Let me take a look. See, where is it? Dallas Turner. Oh, he got 35 total snaps. 23 pass rush, 6 coverage, 6 run defense. He's only on the field for 6 run defense snaps, which seems like there were only 18 of them to go around, so that's not that significant, I guess. But yeah, I mean, he didn't do a ton outside of that. Obviously, he's kind of in this rotational role is wrong because he was on the field much more than like a quote unquote rotational defender, but he's in like a sub package type role. He's not going to see the field as much as like Jonathan Bernard, who had like 51 snaps, which I think leads all of the defensive line / front 5 type players. Yeah, it does. Yeah. So 51 leads anybody on the line of scrimmage. And then you have 67 from both safeties, because of course you do. 63 from Metellus, 62 for Blake Cashman. What's really funny is that Ivan Pace only has 38 because they had to bench him a little bit after the 2 penalties on the same play. Like, it was on special teams, but like the next couple of snaps were on defense. And Brian Flores was like, I got to talk to this guy. He's not going to be on the field for a little bit. But yeah, I think that we saw a really, and what's great is that you had a bunch of players get pressure, and it wasn't necessarily a product of like a really high blitz rate. Like I remember the last time, the Vikings, had like an 80% blitz rate against a team. I forget who it was. Was it it wasn't the Giants, was it? They had an 80% blitz rate against a team last year. And in that situation, you wouldn't be shocked to learn that like 12 different players logged a pressure. Like, okay, yeah, that's the highest blitz rate any team has had since we've been recording blitz rates. The next highest actually also occurred that year because of the Giants, except it was this time their defensive coordinator, Wink Martindale, who did it. I think against the Ravens, maybe. It was it was also an 80%, but the Vikings beat it out by a little bit. And it was the highest we'd ever had in the history of being able to record blitz rates. And so you ended up with like 12 different players getting pressures. Well, here, you've got 10 different players getting pressures, and you had a blitz rate of like 38% or something like that. Much lower, much, much, much lower. Still one of the highest blitz rates in the league. That's just the nature of things. But a much lower blitz rate, a much closer to kind of a standard looking defense, which I think also tells us that this is a situation where Brian Flores is not relying on having to build like a gimmick defense. Like we talk about like gimmick offenses every so often, especially in college football. Like, the Tennessee Volunteers offense is like a gimmick offense. Like that's a crazy offense that just, spreads the field out to unnatural proportions and conducts its like witchcraft and produces yards for no good reason. And it doesn't look like football, and I hate it. Last year's defense, I didn't hate it. I loved it, but it was a gimmick defense, right? Like, it was the West Virginia offensive defenses, right? It was the Dana Holgorsen defense, essentially, where they would just do crazy stuff because they couldn't rely on their talent winning out. And here, you still have kind of the Brian Flores thumbprint on the defense for sure. It's definitely a Brian Flores defense, but they're doing a lot more stuff that is pretty typical of a standard defense. And the reason that you do those things is because standard defenses have like fewer holes in them. Like the reason the Vikings defense worked so well last year is because people couldn't figure out for a while kind of what the weaknesses were because they had misdiagnosed the defense, or it was, they didn't have time between, film sessions to really break it down. They had like a week to game plan or something like that. And then week 14, a week after Kevin Seifert publishes his article breaking down the defense, it gets solved, and catastrophic performances in the final 4 weeks of the season. Here, you don't have that because it's a defense that has answers to a lot of problems. It's just more familiar to opposing quarterbacks, so they would, in theory, be able to solve it. But it still has the aggressive blitz rates. It still has, the off coverage to kind of keep your eyes forward in case there's a screen, stuff like that. But we saw, I think, a more standard look. We saw them use the reputation of their defense, put 7 players on the line of scrimmage, and then only rush 4 and crowd the protection unit with defenders that they had to account for and stuff like that. So really good design, but you ended up with really good individual performances from people doing the stuff that is going to be asked of them all year. People like Dallas Turner rushing the passer, or Jonathan Grenard, rushing the passer, or in the case of Harrison Phillips, just being a wrecking ball in the middle of the offensive line, just really great stuff. He was throwing people aside. I mean, he ended up with I think that of the defenders, he might have had the second best game. He was outstanding throughout the game. And, he ended up with I think a quarterback hit, I want to say. Let's see. Let's take a look at this. He does not end up with a quarterback hit, but he does have a sack and he has a hurry and a batted pass. The batted pass was nice. But yeah, he assisted on 4 tackles. He was a big part of making sure that, on the occasions that Devin Singletary would run the ball, that you couldn't run up the gut. You had to bounce it outside. But really just freeing up a bunch of other people on their pass rushes and in run fits and stuff like that. So maybe the best game that Harrison Phillips has had in a Vikings uniform. I thought it was really, really excellent. So a lot of really great individual performances. Josh Metellus had an outstanding game that I really liked a lot. Harrison Smith, obviously, he ends up with a pick as well. He had a really good game. Ivan Pace, when he was on the field, not committing special teams penalties, purely as a defender, pretty good game. Better in run defense, I think, in this game than he has been throughout, than he had been last year as a rookie, which is fine because he was a blitzing linebacker most of the time. Really good blitzer in this game too, a thing that he's just good at. But yeah, I really enjoy, and a lot of these bit players came to play, like Jihad Ward and Jonathan Bullard and Jerry Tillery, guys that aren't ever going to be a big part of the game plan, but rotate in every so often. Pat Jones, obviously, with 2 sacks. The 4th edge rusher, 2 sacks, right? Really excellent. Again, you're up against a Giants offensive line that has 1 player, and then you're up against Daniel Jones, and you're up against just the Giants organization in general. It's going to be a little bit easier, but NFL teams usually score more than 6 points. So it was a pretty good, even bad ones. It was a pretty good performance from the Vikings defense.
It was nice. And preventing some of those points was the interception by Harrison Smith as well.
Yeah, really loved it. Telegraphed, I think, but just really excellent coming up from the top and undercutting the was it a comeback route, I think? But getting there before the receiver had an understanding of what Daniel Jones kind of wanted to do with the ball. I'm not confident Daniel Jones knew what he wanted to do with the ball either, but just Harrison Smith sometimes just has an understanding of what's about to happen. People have, Brett Coleman actually, to bring him back to the conversation, have compared him to Detroit Polamalu, and from the sense that Polamalu kind of had a weird understanding of what was going to happen before it happened. You see that from Harrison Smith sometimes. And I think this is a really great example of that. So
just because I've wanted to know this, because after watching the game, what is going on with Daniel? Is it just decision making? Is it lack of talent? Is it, he can't run, obviously, and part of that's probably because they've told him to not do that as much because he just came back from an ACL, but it looked bad. Like, bad. Not just bad, but it looked like the sort of thing that happened today where the Giants put out a statement saying he's our quarterback for week 2. You don't do that.
Did they do that? Oh,
my
God.
They absolutely did that today. The Giants put out a statement saying...
The dreaded vote of confidence.
You got to vote of confidence in right before week 2.
Wow.
That's how bad he played. This was... And, like, Giants fans knew this was a garbage fire of a team. But this was... This stunk even according to those standards.
That is rough. That's you print out that headline and put it in your resume, right? If you're Brian Flores.
You absolutely put that, like, that you frame that. Maybe you blow it up and, like, put it in the background of all your Zoom calls or something. It's going to be a day, but, like... You do something to celebrate it. Yeah, absolutely. The Giants put out the statement today saying that he is our quarterback moving forward. And this happened, admittedly, I also saw a clip where this was being discussed with Schefter and McAfee. And Schefter had said, you know, if this happens right after week 1, this conversation is not over by a long shot. I'm not saying you've got Tommy DeVito breathing down your neck or anything. I am saying that the decision may be made without you.
Right. Yeah, I mean, that's, yeah. And if you look at, I think that what might have played a role in this game, and again, he's not been playing well, right? But if you take a look at like who the most pressured quarterbacks were, you know, this week. So let's take a look at what PFF has to say, which is different than NFL Pro's pressure numbers, but they're actually, the numbers are different, but the proportions are pretty similar. So it's nice that those kind of match up. But like, you know, the most pressured quarterbacks are people who spent a lot of time in the pocket. So Bo Nix, for example, spent 3 seconds on average in the pocket. Deshaun Watson, even longer. Jacoby Brissett, even longer than those two. Sam Darnold was one of the most pressured quarterbacks. He didn't spend a ton of time in the pocket, but it was relatively long. Daniel Jones was the 6th most pressured quarterback of week 1, but his time to throw was 2.77 seconds, which is about NFL average. Like that's crazy. Like, and again, Darnold is right up there, 2.87 seconds. They're like right next to each other in time to throw in week 1. But like to be, you know, 5th and 6th in total pressures received while your average time to throw is essentially average in the NFL is kind of wild. It suggests either that you've got slow eyes, which I did suggest is potentially potentially an issue with Darnold relative to all the other skills that he's performing really well right now, or that your coverage is holding up really well, which I think might be the case for the Vikings defense against the Giants offense. That might have played a role. Or you're panicking a little bit, which I think definitely happened to Daniel Jones. What's interesting, though, is that when Darnold panics, I shouldn't say panics because he didn't panic in this game. When Darnold senses pressure, it seems like he thinks, and this is often the case, that there is a reason for that, and that reason is an active choice the defense made, and that they sacrifice something to do that, which means that there's somebody open. Okay, and then he tries to find that person open downfield, right? He wants to exploit what the other team did in order to get there. Great. Daniel Jones, he just checked down. Like he was just like, okay, well, this is a problem. I'm just going to get it to the running back. Sam Darnold ended up with the 7th highest average depth of target in week 1. No one was ever going to beat Anthony Richardson, who had a depth of target of 17.3, a completion percentage of 47.4%, and a yards per attempt of 11.2. Just wild numbers. But Darnold, 9.1 average depth of target. That's relatively deep over the course of a full season. Daniel Jones was 2nd lowest in the NFL in week 1. Gardner Minshew at 4.7. Daniel Jones at 5.0. I was bagging on Bo Nix the whole game. He was playing against the Seahawks and for his like low depth of target. But by the end of the game, he had a 6.3 yard depth of target, which is quite low compared to a full season's worth. It's among kind of the lower quartile of depths of target around the NFL. But 5.0, that's crazy, especially because there was a deep shot in the game from Daniel Jones. Like, that's wild that you only had 5 yards downfield on an average throw. And it was, I think, because of pressure. I think it's because of panic. I think it's because the Vikings covered pretty well downfield. But I think Jones is just kind of cooked. Like, I think he's seen too much. The injury probably impacted him.
He's seen too much.
Seen too much.
I get it. It's just a fun sentence to say.
The things he's seen, man.
Yeah, it's Daniel Jones. Not long for this NFL world as a starter, anyway. That was rough. Well, let's wrap up the game here because I want to do something a little different this season on the Monday night shows. What I'd like to do is kind of take a look at what did we learn this week. And week 1 is full of fun moments you can overreact to. We're trying not to do that. However, we do have some things that we learned this week. First off, I learned that Caleb Williams and his footwork have a lot of work to do. Holy crap. Not since he's the unholy child of Tavares Jackson and Tebow for his footwork. I've never seen anybody this happy feet in a pocket before. My God. It is all arm. There's no shoulder. There's no hips. It is just, if this is the way they want him to throw, because he didn't throw like this in college, the Bears need to be investigated for something evil here.
It was really bad. So he ended up with like a 47% completion rate or something like that, if I remember correctly. Like I should be looking at the statistics, but like it was pretty bad. And I know that his completion percentage over average or expectation was like dead last in the league. His EPA per play was dead last in the league. And like, yeah, he's a rookie, I guess. But like typically, even in week 1, the rookies that turn out to be good usually aren't the worst, right? Again, we'll always have Josh Allen screwing up our ability to determine, rookie quarterback prognosis. But like, it was bad, right? His completion rate was 20 points below what you would expect for someone throwing with his depth of target to the ball locations he was throwing to.
48%. 48.2.
I guess 47. That was close.
Yeah.
That's crazy. That's a problem. You got to work on that, I guess. Yeah, Caleb Williams did not have a good debut. Bo Nix didn't have a good debut. JJ McCarthy didn't play. Drake May didn't play. Michael Penix didn't play. Bless them. The only player that had a positive EPA per play, who nevertheless looked quite bad among the rookie quarterbacks, was Jaden Daniels, who, again, I have to stress, that was not, to me, an optimistic showing for what he can do as an NFL quarterback. His net contributions were exceedingly positive. He ranked like 7th in the NFL in EPA per play. A lot of that, of course, was on the ground. His completion percentage over expected was like pretty poor, and I think that a lot of that was on him. But he could run the ball, and they kept on ramming him into the defensive line as if they weren't the Washington Commanders and have had ample reason to understand why it's a bad thing to do that with your undersized, wafer-thin quarterback. But okay, sure.
God, he looked small out there, like way smaller than he should be.
It's a blessing that they also had Emmanuel Forbes on their roster, who got hurt in that game, by the way, because there was at least one player on the roster who wasn't the kicker that looked more like a child than him. Like, just an insane situation there. But like, he seeks out contact a lot. He like runs headlong into danger, and instead of like working around that or attempting to mediate it, Washington was like, that's a quality we like about you. We're going to make you run the ball a lot on purpose against NFL defenders. Just crazy. But yeah, Caleb Williams, not great. Bo Nix, not great. Jaden Daniels, not great, but at least you got something out of it.
Yeah.
So there's that. But yeah, really bad showing for the rookie quarterbacks.
Yeah, Caleb Williams especially, and Luke Braun had tweeted out a video, and he had said, I'm admittedly somebody who wasn't high on him, but wow. It had every offensive. It had every pass. I say every offensive snap. That wasn't it. It had every pass that Jaden Daniels threw, and a couple of, or sorry, Caleb Williams, and some of the runs that he had made. And between balls soaring over heads and just the most awkward all arm throws you've ever seen, it looked like Uncle Rico out there. Like he was scared for his life, and he was just launching it as far as as high as he could. It was not great. Also, thing I learned this week: Kirk Cousins looks like he's starting, so somebody else doesn't take his job.
Yeah, he is probably hurt still.
Well, if you look at, and I don't mean to become the footwork guy, but like, if you look at his dropbacks, he's barely putting any pressure on his back foot when he's throwing either. Like, he's not moving. Yeah, he's more of a statue than he was in Minnesota, and that says something.
Yeah, well, he's a guy that relies on really rock solid mechanics to drive the ball. Like, he's been very good throughout his career of marrying, his throws with his footwork and, extracting every bit of force that he can from the motion itself. He's been extremely good at that. And if he can't do that, it's over. He doesn't have, when you're somebody like a Patrick Mahomes or a Patrick Mahomes, imitator like Caleb Williams, maybe, like a Kyler Murray also has a pretty strong arm, Josh Allen, you don't have to have a stable platform in order to whip the ball out and throw it, right? Caleb Williams probably needs it for control reasons, because kind of the more power that you generate from your arm, the less control your arm can exert. It's almost like a sliding scale. But you don't have to, the stronger kind of output you can generate, the less of a percentage you have to put into it to get the arm strength that you need to get the ball where you want it to go. And so you can spend a little bit more of that energy on accuracy, right? And if you can do that, right, that's great. If you're like Cam Newton and you could just throw off platform, you can get some really nice accurate throws in there. Like Anthony Richardson's 67-yard Insano bomb this week. He was hit as he was thrown, and he was throwing completely off platform, and it was just a teardrop right into the receiver's hands in the end zone. Just beautiful, perfect stuff. Okay, you can get away with that. Kirk Cousins isn't that guy. You can't get away with it. He needs to drive off of his back foot in order to have both power and control in his passes, and it very much looks like he's still kind of hurt. I mean, he didn't play the entire preseason, right? Which I guess, sure. And my understanding is that he wasn't a huge participant in joint practices. Atlanta Falcons fans might have to check me on that one. But that's my understanding going into this game. So he didn't have a ton of reps. And the thing is, they did ask him to do different stuff. So Luke, again, tweeted out a thread where he was talking about how they changed Kirk Cousins' footwork. In fact, it's driving Luke up the wall so much, he asked me if he could write about that for Wide Left. And he's like, this isn't really a Vikings article, and I don't want to make it a Vikings article because we can't. Luke very much doesn't like the keeping tabs on former Vikings players in Glee kind of thing, and I get that. That's totally not his bag, and it's not really mine either. But he can't get it out of his head. And I was like, okay, well, here's an angle where we can make it work. And so, look forward to that over at Wide Left when Luke turns it in and submits it. But it's driving him up the wall. They changed his footwork. Instead of having his left foot back, it's even footwork. Even footwork is typically used on option plays for running quarterbacks. It allows you to, not tip the direction that you're running the ball because, the foot that you have back is the one you're going to drive off of when you receive the snap and run. And so you have even footwork, but it changes the way that you drop back, which makes him look awkward. And that might be the reason that it looks like he's not pushing off of his back foot. I wouldn't be surprised, though, if it was a combination of that and the injury that he may still be recovering from. But it makes everything look awkward and slow. Again, he could be slow because of an injury, right? He's like a 36-year-old, 35-year-old coming off of an Achilles tear. Like, that's pretty significant. But the footwork was screwed up. And so that's a problem. One thing that was also worth noting, I don't know if Luke got to that, but they were in pistol a bunch, and
just about the whole game.
Yeah, essentially the whole game. And It's actually really stupid because when they were in shotgun, they would throw 80% of the time, and when they were in pistol, they'd run 80%. It was a brutal tell. It was a really bad tell. Like offensive coordinator 101, don't do that. But they were in pistol a lot. Kirk Cousins has had like 15 total pistol snaps in his career up until then. It's just not something he has a ton of practice in or has worked on that much. And so that probably impacted a lot of things. There was not that much play action, and when there was play action, they weren't rolling him out. That's like the thing that he is like famously good at. Like so good at that when Jalen Ramsey was roasting all these quarterbacks, like he was just going down a list, roasting quarterbacks, like that guy sucks, that guy sucks, that guy sucks. And he got to Kirk Cousins, of all people, right? Like one of the most insulted high-level quarterbacks like in the NFL, right? You get to Kirk Cousins and he's like, that guy is really good at play action. Like what? And I remember there was a study, and this is several years old now, so it may no longer be true, but there was a study that was like looking at play action efficiency versus non-play action efficiency. And it found, of course, that, almost every quarterback in the NFL is more efficient on play action than not on play action. But the degree to which they are more efficient varies from season to season. It's not stable how much better you are at play action than non-play action. The exception, 2 quarterbacks. 1, Peyton Manning. 2, Kirk Cousins. Like, this is the play action guy, right? Like Lamar Jackson, Jalen Hurts have high play action rates and thrive off of play action because most of the methods that we account for play action don't distinguish between play action and read and RPO, read pass option. And so what looks like a play action is actually an active decision to either hand the ball off or pull the ball back and throw it based off of how a defender is reacting, whereas play action is just a fake, right? So when you have a quarterback like Cousins and you never have him especially roll out, which is something that he's been really good at, but don't have him do that much play action, you change his footwork, he might still be hurt. Like, yeah, of course you're going to lose to a Steelers team that can't score a touchdown. By the way, they didn't score a touchdown in the whole, at all. And they won 18-10. It's sick. It's disgusting.
Sickos.
Just obscene. So I had the Falcons winning the division, the NFC South. After week 1, I'm like, we can't be week 1 overreactors, but I guess it's the Saints.
It could be the Saints. It could be the Buccaneers. It could be the Bucs because assuming the Saints only looked good because the Panthers are the Panthers this year, the Bucs could run away with that division. So that's
So I mentioned that Darnold was number 1 in CPOE. Baker Mayfield was number 1 in the EPA per play. Oh boy, weird. The top 5 in EPA plus CPOE composite are Patrick Mahomes and 4 just guys. Like Baker Mayfield, Derek Carr, Sam Darnold, and another guy. I already forgot who it was. What are we doing?
There's some real fun, questionable stuff happening with that.
Love week 1.
Yeah, week one's always fun, but this one was in particular just like all the numbers are made up. The stats don't matter. The Bucs are potentially good.
Great.
Cleveland is losing their mind right now over quarterback play and Baker Mayfield being good now. I guess the final thing I learned this week is that even at 6:15 in the morning on sports radio in Cleveland, you can get the guy to curse on the radio if you bring up all of Baker Mayfield's numbers. There was a clip going around this morning on Twitter with a guy going, "Dude, it's too early. I don't want to do." He's yelling into the phone, or he's yelling into the microphone. He's like, "It's too early for this. I don't want to do this." Guy called up with the comparison of Baker Mayfield's quarterback rating and Deshaun Watson's, and you can imagine there is a gulf between them, and he was not happy about the exchange. So, but Arif, what did you learn this week?
that the law plays a very important role in mediating social outcomes, but not necessarily to enforce what we would understand to be an ideal social order. I'm, of course, talking about the Tyreek Hill arrest.
Which, boy, we will
yeah.
have more on that at some point. Because that story will not be going away anytime soon.
Yeah, there is I don't know if concern is the correct word, but there is seemingly some momentum, where obviously, this is a stats-based podcast. We definitely believe in momentum.
Wow, that's all right.
No, there's some momentum that would suggest that, this isn't over and that Tyreek Hill wants to continue making a pretty big deal of what is very clearly a very big deal and a pretty egregious civil rights violation. Like, it's not like the body cam footage was released and it's like, oh yeah, I assumed based off of, my perspective and based off of the history I've seen of police officer interactions that go viral, I assumed that the police were probably in the wrong. I did not realize that they would be this in the wrong. It's a complicated situation when it is Tyreek Hill being the one kind of advocating for civil police reform. That's a tough one to swallow for reasons that I'm sure 99% of our listeners are very familiar with. But also, I do want to say, curious timing, because I believe Deshaun Watson, and I'm going to Google this just to make 100% sure that I didn't get got by someone retweeting an old tweet.
Nope. If you're referring to the lawsuit, this is fresh.
Okay. You understand why I was like,
oh,
wait,
absolutely.
I just got to double check.
Yep.
Yeah. So Deshaun Watson sued for sexual assault and battery. That is new. The incident obviously is old. It seems like it is from 2020. Remember the lawsuits for his sexual harassment / assault? I think that they were primarily harassment. Sexual misconduct is the kind of umbrella term that people were using for it. Were filed in 2021, from spanning his whole time with the Houston Texans. But the accusation for sexual assault and battery, which is more severe than the majority of the accusations of sexual misconduct, the details are bad. I'm not going to get into it. But they come from around the same time. This time he's at this person's home. So it wasn't at a massage parlor. But it seems like it's related or something like that. Again, I read the details of the encounter itself and not the details of the context surrounding it, but it is quite bad. And it is notable that this occurs while Deshaun Watson is very clearly not an effective quarterback for the Cleveland Browns. And a lot of people, including the people who initially reported or broke this news, indicated that this does, as crass and as cynical as this sounds, it's just the way that covering the NFL works. Like, some tragedy occurs, and you think about it in terms of NFL implications, is that this is a new allegation that this could give the Browns an out on all of the guaranteed money that they provided Deshaun Watson. And you can't help but wonder, not necessarily whether or not the allegations are true or not, but whether or not there's been some kind of motivation to push this forward, provide support in the background or something along those lines because of that. I'm not saying that the wondering is appropriate or that that's actually what happened. But because of the cynical nature of the NFL, because of how mechanistic they are, how kind of results-oriented they are, it feels like some Machiavellian thing that an NFL team, might do. Look for another accuser and encourage her to come forward. And however Deshaun Watson comes to justice, I don't really care, right? Go for it. But it is Jesus, man, the law is doing a lot this week. It's week 1.
Yeah, it's a long season. This is absolutely a marathon, not a sprint.
Yeah.
What else did you learn this week?
Bryce Young doesn't have it, man. That's bad. That's worse than I thought. Bryce Young doesn't have it. Patrick Mahomes has it. I think the Ravens, even though they lost, they've got the juice. That's like, there's not a ton of good teams based off of week one, right? Like, I don't think that the Lions put together a super compelling performance. Obviously, they won. And there was some like pretty good individual throws, some pretty good individual runs, not just from Jahmyr Gibbs either, David Montgomery as well. Jameson Williams ended up with, I think, the player of the game on Sunday Night Football. He had a really good game, and that's like something that, you know, we got to be on alert for, if that's like a one game thing or if he's truly the player that he was supposed to be. But I don't know, for whatever reason, I'm not crazy compelled by how well the Detroit Lions played in that game. They were behind, I think, for a good chunk of the game too. It's just not that many good teams. I don't know. It just feels like there's like, I mean, and the teams that will turn out to be good just didn't play well in week one. Like the Bengals, for example, I'm confident they'll figure it out. But crazy sentence, imagine saying that 10 years ago. But that week one showing against the Patriots was brutal. I'm in an eliminator league, and more people picked the Bengals than any other team that week. Thankfully, I'm not one of them. And so like 36% of our league got eliminated, most of them because they picked the Bengals. I think 2 people picked the Falcons, and so that's why they got eliminated. But yeah, but like the teams that we expected to play better just didn't play all that well. Like we expected the Eagles to do a little bit more than they did at the end of last year. Didn't really get that. Didn't get that coming. It was just the Chiefs, and the Chiefs started out like with a loss against Detroit last year, right? And they started out really slow for a good chunk of the season. And so that's not going to tell us how like week 17, 18 in the playoffs are going to go, but I'm just waiting for teams to get online. And I think it's like this preseason thing, right? Like I think that it's like we there's a lot to investigate here, because I think generally speaking, quarterback play has kind of gone down versus 4 years ago. This might be a defensive response. We might be seeing more too high safeties. We're seeing fewer passing plays in general. We're missing a preseason game. There's a lot of things at play here that's kind of worth investigating. But dim week one, I will say there was a funny moment. Of course, it was the Washington Commanders. Who else would it be?
Who else would do something this stupid?
So if people are unfamiliar with Project Veritas, which I believe no longer exists, it's the O'Keefe Foundation. This kid, he was 17 years old at the time, takes down Acorn, a voter registration nonprofit, a national voter registration nonprofit, and I'm just going to be completely out in the open with what I get. I don't even think these are biases, because I think it was all demonstrably the case, but it's going to sound biased. With selectively edited footage of canvassers suggesting that and I believe the canvassers individually did fake sign up fake voters, but none of those fake voters voted, and Acorn explicitly warned against doing that and trained their canvassers not to do that. So O'Keefe suggested that this was an institutional problem as opposed to just a couple of people that he caught doing it, that didn't result in any actual voter fraud and more just resulted in a bureaucratic nightmare for Acorn. He got famous off of this, especially in conservative circles, because Acorn is attempting to register voters in progressive areas so that they could increase the voter share for Democrats. Like, get out the vote type stuff. That's pretty normal. But it's associated with Democrats. So O'Keefe became a Republican, hero a little bit. And so on top of that, he's been doing this for like years and years and years. So if you remember like the videos that got leaked, also selectively edited from like Planned Parenthood, those are the O'Keefe Foundation people. And his strategy for the past like 5 years is for him and his employees to go on dating apps, often Grindr, but, sometimes Tinder, sometimes, Bumble, whatever, right? Hinge, and pose as people interested in dates for people in, sensitive. It's typically in DC. So at some point you're going to snag somebody who knows some stuff, right? Like that's just what DC is. And this time, yeah. And I guess this time it was the Washington Commanders Vice President of Content, which is an awful title. Disgusting that that's a title. But vice president of content just like says, just got O'Keefed, just like says a bunch of really stupid stuff on this date, which I am led to believe, because these are often like these videos often seem to occur on first dates, which, like, why are you spilling all these secrets?
If you're talking like this on if we can bring this back to James's relationship corner for just a moment, if you're talking like this on a first date, there's a reason why you're single.
Yeah, this is rough stuff. But yeah, I mean, like, DC is a town where, the currency is power. And so the appearance that you know more than you do, or that you know a lot, or that you're an insider, or that you're powerful, sharing secrets is one way to demonstrate your value in that kind of community, I guess. So if I were to backwards justify it for a culture I don't exist in, which is the DC power movers culture, I guess that would be it. Grabbing a team employee instead of a politician is interesting. But, as soon as you learn, like, oh, this person is relatively high up on the Washington Commanders, so I'll just turn my hidden camera on and see what we can get. The guy accuses Jerry Jones of being racist and anti-gay, which, you know what? Yeah, sure, fine. Probably, right? We saw him on the stairs during, like, the Little Rock 9, right? Like, he had to apologize for that, right? Like, there's not a stretch is what I'm saying. Okay, cool. But then, like, he just talks about, like, okay, here's over 50% of our roster is white religious, and God says F the gays. That's their interpretation. I don't buy any of that. Another big chunk of our roster is low-income African Americans that comes from a community that is inherently homophobic, which, I mean, I want to get that out there. Statistically, that's actually not true. That's just a weird perception that people have had for a very long time that just runs up against the data. That is not the case. But okay. Also said some players are dumb as hell, and the ones who are smart don't stay that way after getting hit in the head too many times. Crazy thing to say. Wildly disrespectful thing. Holy crap, dude. Like, yeah, some players are dumb, of course. Some people are dumb. That's normal, right? But it's just an insane thing to be like, oh yeah, they all get concussion rattled and are stupid. Like, first of all, you work for a team and you don't talk to players. That's a nuts thing to say. This one really bothers me, because a lot of times, a lot of the people that I talk to are people who are, like, in their second career after their NFL career is over and figuring out what they want to do. And a lot of these people are like I recently talked to Orange Julius, the tight end for the Broncos and the Jaguars. Julius Thomas, that's it. So his nickname was Orange Julius. Julius Thomas. He has a medical degree. He's like a master's in an academic medical related field. He's working on neurology and medicine and mental health for players. Like, he does a lot of clinical work, and he consults with the Harvard Fellowship on NFL athletes. Like, these are all accomplished people, right? And it just sucks that, that, like, you would do this. And, like, just stereotype, like, there is something about football locker rooms that are conservative culture. We've seen polls of players that are very split down racial lines, where white players are much more likely to vote Republican, whereas black players, you don't really get a huge likelihood, because, I think it was like 90% of black people typically vote Democrat. But when you look into higher income brackets, that breaks down a little bit for relatively obvious reasons. But, like, for white players, it's, like, pretty clear. And so, like, you do get, like, a conservative locker room culture in some respects, but, like, it is crazy to typify it in these ways that don't really run at all with reality and are insulting on top of that. He also insults the fans. And, like, okay, like, if you work for a team long enough, and maybe you just have a bunch of bad experiences with a bunch of these players, which to me suggests, I don't know, maybe there's something wrong with the team you work for. It is the Washington Commanders. And before that, he worked for, like, the New York Jets, like, work for a functional organization and then get back to me. But, like, And there's some stuff like that he says. It's like, I don't think that the league social justice initiatives were done out of like a true belief that they could do anything. They just wanted to make as much money as possible. Like, yeah, I agree with that. But like calling fans like just high school educated alcoholics, mouth breathers, like that's a nuts thing to do. And it's just like on a first date, just unleashing this. Like that's crazy.
That makes the wine towel story seem like normal for conversation. Like that is just absolutely ridiculous. How do you make me sound like, oh yeah, this is fine?
Yeah, and what's crazy is if you take a look at kind of the conservative reaction to this, they take part of what this guy says as like a gospel truth and run with that as if it's confirmed. And then part of what this guy says as evidence that the NFL is evil and that you can't trust him because the NFL is evil. It's very selective. Like when I was looking at some conservative publications, and mostly blogs, not like publications covering this, it was like, oh, this guy said that NFL fans are mouth breathers. That proves that the NFL is part of this kind of elitist thing, that the NFL believes this. And then this guy also says that the NFL is being performative on social justice issues. You know, that proves that this is all fake. So, okay, you believe the guy in the one thing and you don't believe the guy and like calling Jerry Jones like anti-gay and racist, that's like proof that the NFL is like, it's just like weird what they'll be selective about, what they won't be. But like mostly the takeaway from the story is like, hey man, go on like a couple of dates before you go off, I think.
Yeah, there are better looks that you could be involved in. This is definitely not one of them. Well, yeah. Let's get into the mailbag. We got some good questions in here, and eventually it goes off a cliff. And Don from Ohio makes his triumphant return to the mailbags. We get to make fun of him. So, first question. Lurking asks, I know I've probably already asked this, but how in the hell did the Vikings lose a playoff game to Daniel Jones?
It was a different time.
Yes, that is what will. It's like when your grandparent says something that like raises your eye. Like it was a different time. It was in a different era. Defense was a little stronger that day.
Yeah, it was. Losing to Daniel Jones was a little bit more acceptable back then. No, I mean, like he was better 2 years ago than he was now. I never thought he was good, and it was very funny that he got the contract. But obviously, he was better. He could move. He was like that year. He was one of the leading rushers in the NFL at the quarterback position. It was like Lamar Jackson, Josh Allen, him, and then like Marcus Mariota, because that's like what the Falcons were doing at the time. He was like good at that thing, and now he doesn't even have that.
Yeah. We also have a question from Eric who asks, should I feel bad for Daniel Jones?
Yes and no, I guess. Like he opted into this, and I think that if it's just like, man, he tried to reach the highest echelon of football play and just fell short. Like NFL starter, that's great, but he just fell short of what he wanted to. He's got this big contract, you know, from an expectations perspective, there's a lot on his shoulders, but he did opt into it, and that's kind of what happens when you sign the contract. So from that perspective, I'd say no. From the perspective of like he's getting harassed as he's like leaving the stadium, like I don't know if you saw that video, but like the player exit, which is also the player entrance, was like open to fans or whatever, which I don't use the player entrance and exit at other stadiums, but the media entrance at US Bank Stadium is right next to the player entrance. And like fans can't get there. There's like a gate to that parking lot. You just can't get there. And I don't know why fans are allowed to be there at the player exit and entrance at MetLife. That's wild to me.
Well, that's where I met Linval, because I was waiting for you after the Jets game, and yeah, that's basically where you ended up like coming out, and yeah, the players were leaving and everything, and it was just sitting there like I don't think I'm supposed to be standing here, but nobody's telling me I can't. So here we are.
And that's That's what I'm getting at. Like, someone should have been telling you that you couldn't. Like, it's crazy. So they like camped out to like yell at him, and like, I do actually feel bad about, like, a lot of people are like, oh, these players make so much money, I can't feel bad about them. And it's like, that's stupid. Like, they're like, money solves like a lot of problems, but it doesn't solve like every problem. And people are always looking to find meaning in life, right? Like, they're always trying to find something to do. Like, this is why so many lottery winners become depressed, because we have engineered, like, socially engineered people to believe that like the pursuit of money is kind of the thing that you do, right? It is your purpose in life. It's to maximize your earnings. Well, once you've done that as a lottery winner without doing anything, it can be pretty depressing. Plus, there's a bunch of other things, like, you know, the ability to manage money and stuff like that. The alienation from your friends as they keep on like bothering you for money. You know, there's like a bunch of other associated things, but they like lose purpose, right? And the reason I'm bringing this up is because people find meaning all the time, and necessarily must, outside of earning a living. And so it is okay for us to acknowledge that NFL players can feel bad about stuff when they get paid a lot, right? Like, they don't have the same obstacles that we do. A lot of doors have opened up for them. NFL players are a little bit different than lottery winners, and they take on an extraordinary amount of like personal physical risk in order to do that, which is like something that I think a lot of people don't pay attention to that fact. But even outside of that, like, this is like the thing that the guy is trying to do. And I think it's like one thing to get booed in a stadium. And I understand like it's got to be an insane feeling to have 60,000 people booing you. Or if like you play for like the University of Michigan, 100,000 people, like these stadiums can get insane sized. But like 60,000 people, 70,000 people just like booing you has to be out of this world. But that's, at least there's a distance. The closeness of that exit when you're out of uniform is crazy. And I do feel bad for that, because people always want to accomplish their goals. And when they can't, it sucks, no matter how much money they were paid to accomplish their goals. If those goals are evil, like let's say you're a hedge fund manager, I don't feel bad. But if it's like to play football well, that's fine. That's an acceptable goal to have. And so it sucks that you've organized your entire life around being good at football and you can't do it. And that part, you've opted into that. But like the part where like fans are a foot away from you yelling at you, that sucks, man. So I feel bad about that. But the rest of the stuff where he makes a lot of money and doesn't play well, it sucks. But, you know, that's part of the bargain, I think, and that's a fair bargain. So I don't feel that bad. It's just the fan thing.
Just the fan thing. It makes sense. Zach Dixon asks, how did Flores' defensive scheme on Sunday compare to last year? Didn't feel like there was many blitzes on first watch.
Yeah, no, there were fewer blitzes, of course. We brought that up in our review, but there were also, I think, a wider variety of coverages. Like the Vikings last year did a lot of like 5-person zones that looked a lot like man coverage, but were zone coverage, which is why it was actually really difficult to figure out what they were doing, because I think a lot of us, definitely me included, assumed that they were doing a lot of man coverage on the back end for the first couple of weeks of the season. That's what it looked like a lot, but they were just doing it like weird and different. And it should have clicked for me at some point. I guess it didn't for a lot of offensive coordinators, so I guess I shouldn't beat myself up too much. But like, should have clicked that like, oh, the reason it looks weird and different is because they're actually in zone, and it's like a zone match. And so that's kind of why it feels like man coverage. And that's just what you do when you rush 6 people, man coverage. And so it just didn't cross my mind. But like, they're like mixed coverages. Like they're mixing man and zone. They're changing up the back end. They run, cover 1, cover 3, and cover 2, right? Like they're just doing a lot of standard stuff, and it's working really well. Now they'll do it maybe in creative ways. They'll show blitz and they won't blitz. We saw a Zimmer double A gap look, which probably we shouldn't call it a Zimmer one, because I remember before, like I think I was writing about the Vikings in the Leslie Frazier era, so obviously well before Zimmer. And I think Washington they were about to play Washington, and I interviewed the Hog Haven, I think, the SB Nation site for the Washington Commanders. and I interviewed them, and I was like, well, what's kind of like the thing that like, the offensive line should watch out for? Because the Vikings offensive line is bad. And what should they watch out for? And he described sugaring the A-gap, I think is what the blogger I talked to mentioned. And he talked about like how it works and how the person who rushes is the one the center turns away from. Like, these are all the rules that we ended up learning as a whole as Vikings fans when Zimmer showed up, right? And this is before like Zimmer was in Cincinnati, right? And so this was like something that was occurring in Washington without really Zimmer's influence. And so maybe it's not fair to say that that's the Zimmer A-gap, double A-gap look, but like that's just what happens with coordinators, is that they may not invent something, but they'll perfect it and deploy it. And it's theirs now. And for Zimmer, it's the double A-gap look. We saw that this week for the Vikings again. It looked a little bit different, but it ultimately looked like the 14, 15, 16 Vikings, where they did a lot less than 17, 18, and 19, but it looked a lot like that. And they would drop both linebackers in coverage, looked like they were blitzing, got one-on-one coverage, the center's blocking nobody. That was nice. So a lot of little differences.
Next question is going to be from Will Melvin, who asks, when does playing time start to negatively affect player development in the context of rookie quarterbacks? Is benching a rookie quarterback who is struggling actually worse than letting them continue to start week to week?
So last year, actually, when the Colts named Anthony Richardson their starter, like rookie, right? Everybody had this understanding of Anthony Richardson as this incredibly raw quarterback. And everyone was like, man, why are you starting this? Like, this is a guy that like needs to sit. Obviously, he would be forced to after he got injured in the fourth game of the season. But like at the time, obviously no one knew that, right? And so everyone was like, I shouldn't say everyone, the dominant media narrative was that this guy is just not advanced enough as a quarterback to be put out there. And so putting him out there is going to hurt his development. It's not really the same as other quarterbacks. And so I wrote about developing rookie quarterbacks over at Wide Left. One of actually my first pieces, right? Because I started that on August 14th, 2023. They named him the starter like within like 2 weeks of that. So it was like a pretty early piece. But I mentioned that it really actually, with the way we talk about it is kind of incorrect, because we think of quarterbacks in like two bins, developed and raw. And we think of like the two things that we can do with them. We can play them or we can sit them. And that's not really fair, because there are some traits and skills that'll develop a little bit differently from playing than from sitting. And so you need to have a good understanding of what skills they need to work on and how to maximize the development of those skills. And if those skills are better maximized by just throwing them in a game, that's a little bit different. And so when we talked about like sitting JJ McCarthy for a year, McCarthy is kind of understood to be, at least before the Vikings drafted him and talked about all the development that he needed, was kind of understood to be like an NFL-ready quarterback, like in a way that like Drake May wasn't, even though May was kind of like a more well-regarded prospect. But then the Vikings talked about sitting him. Well, what is kind of why did people think that he is a well-developed quarterback despite not throwing the ball all that much at Michigan? Well, I think part of it was because they ran. I wouldn't necessarily call it an NFL-style offense, because they did a bunch of weird stuff with receiver motions, but for the most part, relatively NFL stuff, right? And the personnel would be NFL personnel, and the way that he would go through his progressions, evidently, were like how NFL quarterbacks would. Like, and it's different for every team, kind of the way that you do it. It's actually one reason I thought like it was kind of weird to call Bo Nix a developed quarterback, because even though he was like 25. He wasn't doing NFL stuff. He wasn't asked to make NFL style reads. He was counting the box, and then based off of his box count would either run or, withhold, drop back, right? Based off of box count. No one does box count reads in the NFL, really. So it's just like, it's just different. Right. And that might, how you manage in NFL offense and how you do NFL style reads, that's probably not going to improve from gameplay. You probably need to sit and have a good understanding of the offense, understanding progressions, and go through practices a lot at reduced speed before you go at game speed. Another thing, the reason that McCarthy sat is mechanics. Mechanics, because they're like a neuromuscular thing, essentially. You want to make sure that they're a habit and they're ingrained before you put a player out there, because in response to high stress, mechanics will revert to what players will do what they're used to. Like that's why you practice high stress situations. I was talking about this earlier about quarterbacks that are okay standing in the pocket versus like panicking in the pocket or leaning away from pressure. The thing that humans are like naturally bound to do. You are naturally bound to do the thing that you've been doing your whole life. And if that is a particular type of throw, that's what you'll revert to until you train it out of your system. And so that's why the Vikings wanted to sit him, is because there's a mechanical improvement that he needed to make. Well, with Anthony Richardson, the reason I would argue that you wouldn't want to sit him, and I don't know that Shane Steichen made like the right choice here. He's generally regarded as a pretty good coach, so I think a lot of people just trusted him. But the reason that you wouldn't do it is because Anthony Richardson had relatively refined mechanics, despite his raw label and the low number of snaps that he had. And though he was making NFL style, like his progression approach was very similar to an NFL quarterback's progression approach. And he had really quick eyes. And so really what you wanted him to get used to was the speed of the game. We can't do that in practice. So you throw him out there. So like that's kind of like, so it's different based off of what traits you need to develop and what traits you can develop by having a player start versus not having a player start. So that's kind of how you have that approach. I don't know that sitting Caleb Williams would have done anything for him. I don't know why he was throwing the way that he did, but like that's not the way he's used to throwing. So it's probably not like a reversion thing. Like, oh my God, there's so much pressure, he's reverting to what he's used to. That didn't look like what he was used to, right? Jane Daniels, probably sit him. Like he didn't make NFL style reads. He didn't have a bunch of, like we saw the Giants interview him on Hard Knocks for their offseason Hard Knocks thing. And he just wasn't as attuned to the way that NFL offenses are run as like Drake May was. Right. And so that's like kind of a thing where it feels like you got to sit a guy. But yeah, I mean, just different approaches based off of the things that they need to work on.
Let's go to our next question, which is going to be from Ziggy Delph, who asks, which is a funnier potential outcome of the 2024 season? Sam Darnold becoming a Kirk Cousins-level quarterback now that he's a Viking, Caleb Williams becoming a Trubisky-level quarterback now that he's a Bear, or Kirk Cousins becoming a Desmond Ridder-level quarterback now that he's a Falcon?
Okay, I think all of these are funny, but I think the Caleb Williams one is the funniest, right? To like turn the best quarterback prospect that we've seen since Trevor Lawrence, who I guess is also not playing well according to a lot of people. Some football nerds strongly disagree. That's fine. But yeah, the best prospect since Trevor Lawrence, just turning him into a pumpkin, just incredible stuff. Very Bears, very funny. I think like Sam Darnold becoming a Kirk Cousins level quarterback is like mildly amusing, but it's like that was kind of the ceiling that people were hoping for. And then Kirk Cousins becoming a Desmond Ridder level quarterback. I mean, he's old, so like that was going to happen at some point. So it's not as funny as like fighting fate by grabbing a high level quarterback prospect and just royally screwing it up.
Next question is from Ben, who asks, what level or type of inebriation is required to sit through the Aaron Rodgers documentary coming to Netflix?
That totally, yeah. I mean, the only reason I found out about this is because Matthew Collar quote tweeted it.
Yeah.
This sounds awful. It's a 3-parter, right? Like, Jesus. Okay, yeah, he's going to talk about stuff that's going to make me mad. I think he would suggest ayahuasca. He's a very huge ayahuasca guy.
Is Justice going to have to watch this? Justice has put himself through a lot of Aaron Rodgers coverage.
I think Justice will justify not watching it because he's no longer a Packers quarterback, but I don't think he'll be able to resist. I think he'll watch it anyway.
I think he'll have to. The draw of this is too much. Boy, I do hate when somebody is canceled as hard as he has been, and they cannot get a way to speak their mind out to the people.
Yeah, no, it's really the modern way to shut down free speech. Just is what they've been doing to Aaron Rodgers.
Final nail in the woke coffin. The type of inebriation I'm thinking of is something that was a problem in North Dakota. I believe I've brought it up on the show before. But what was that? No, that's South Dakota. Famously, their slogan was "We're on it."
That's right.
But But in North Dakota, there was a problem for a while of people taking tampons and then soaking them in vodka.
Oh, butt chugging.
Yeah, yep, butt chugging, and then going...
Yeah, I'm from North Dakota. I know about this stuff.
Jamestown, North Dakota in particular had an epidemic of this at one point. I do remember that. So, but point of the story is I believe that's the only way to properly deal, because it's going straight into your bloodstream at that point. So that's the only way to properly deal with the Aaron Rodgers documentary. Room Bolsharif, and we're starting to get off the rails here. Room Bolsharif asks,
if you couldn't tell,
for Arif's Natural Disasters Corner, which would you have a better chance of surviving, a Sharknado or a Bee-nado? There is a Bee-nado coming to whatever god-awful show that is.
I don't think there is a Bee-nado. I think that was a Photoshop.
What was the... is that I want to say it's Rescue 911 because that was the show when we were kids. That's not it. Boy, I'm aging myself terribly at the moment.
It's not a photo. Oh my god! I just googled Bee-nado and I got a result from the rap.
Bee-nado is a thing.
Oh wait, there's a trailer for it. Okay, yeah, so it's super. Oh my gosh! Holy crap! Oh my god! Okay, I haven't watched the trailer yet.
ABC's 911 season 8 Bee-nado. Yeah.
I'm just gonna read this story because it has the quotes from the trailer that really sell it. So far, the 911 team has tackled tsunamis, earthquakes, floods, and a bouncy castle that flew away. Okay, I really got to start watching this show. All right. But this time around, their natural disaster foe is 22 million killer bees. Set to Phil Collins' In the Air Tonight, the 30-second teaser starts with Maddie, Jennifer Love Hewitt. She's in that no way. What? Okay. Yeah. Taking a 911 call. The camera then immediately snaps to show a truck exploding as it carries multiple crates. That truck was hauling 22 million killer bees, a fellow dispatcher tells Maddie. Enough bees to kill, she asks, 44,000 people. Oh, that's perfect. That's incredible.
So, watch along? I feel like that's got to be a Patreon watch along.
Yeah, having not watched any of 911, sorry, Forrester, I know that you've been promoting 911, or no, it was Lone Star 911, the spinoff.
Yeah, whatever.
But I've not been watching 911, much to my chagrin, it seems. We'll have to do a watch along. I don't know that we'll be able to do it on the day that episode releases, which is September 26th. I will not only be in the north of Ireland, that's the day before my birthday. I'm not doing that. Sorry.
Better things to do.
Yeah. So later a watch along of Bee-nado. As to which I could survive better, a Sharknado or a Bee-nado, I think probably a Bee-nado, because the Sharknado, the real issue here, I think, the sheer mass of the sharks, right? Like they're flinging the sharks around. Well, like occasionally,
it's the hurricane. You're dealing with the hurricane and they say hurricane, the tornado, but you're dealing with that and the sharks. As opposed to the bees, which you're just dealing with.
Which is just bees. There's no actual tornado element in the Bee-nado. It's just bees. Mm-hmm. Which again, 44,000 people, 22 million killer bees, right? Like that's not great. But I can run from bees for at least a little bit. I can't run from a shark flung at me at 60 miles an hour. I'm done.
I'm reminded of the video clip that went around from Sharknado of the guy who went through the shark with the chainsaw.
Yeah.
Just
God, what a moment. That occurred during because that was Shark Week, right? Even though it wasn't on the Sci-Fi channel. Was it on the Sci-Fi channel?
It was on Sci-Fi, yeah.
Yeah, but that was back when NFL training camp was in Mankato. So I'd go back to the hotel, turn it on, and all of us would be tweeting during training camp. All of us would be tweeting about it. And then we watch Hard Knocks. And that's the first time I realized that Twitter isn't real life. And by that, I mean, everyone was talking about it on Twitter, at least on my timeline. Every single person seemed to be watching it. And the ratings came out, and it was marginally better than what typically runs on the Sci-Fi channel at that time during that week. Like, okay. I guess it's just such a small... It doesn't matter. None of this matters.
No. None of this matters. Tank B asks, for Arif's corner of hatred, A corner we don't spend enough time on, quite frankly.
What?
Have you ever hated someone so much that you decided to do the Super Bowl halftime show? That is impressive. Kendrick Lamar's level of hate is truly remarkable. And we were doing the math before the show. He could probably do either the entirety of the beef and be within the time limit, or
every track he dropped, or
just play Not Like Us 3.5 times and be fine.
Yeah, okay, so there have been a fair amount of beefs in my lifetime. And I mean not like beefs I have, like with rappers like Machine Gun Kelly, but rather rap beefs among popular rappers against each other, right? And Ether was a track. Like, that was insane. And Pusha T killed it with You Are Hiding a Child, right? Like in the story of Adidon. Like, there have been like some great moments, but never has it been more over than like I don't think people realize that Drake had a response to Not Like Us. That's how over it was.
Yeah.
Like,
he released it, nobody cared.
A response track. Yeah. Like, I think it was what, the Heart Part 6, which is like appropriates, the naming scheme of Kendrick's tracks. Fine. The Heart Part 6, great. No one cared. I saw a professor of I think just a professor of hip hop, right? It was just like professor of music with a concentration in hip hop. I don't know. There's a great video about why the song is such a failure. A lot of people love the video. But like, it's almost unnecessary because people don't even remember the song enough for people to realize that it was a failure, right? Like, he misreads in like one of the most heart-wrenching tracks in Kendrick's discography, right? And people make fun of him for it. And then everyone just forgot because it's like, it's Not Like Us. Not Like Us was playing on the bumper of every sporting event that summer. And also during the NFL season, college teams had spring practice air Not Like Us, and then their bumpers for their games were Not Like Us. It was walkout music in baseball, of all sports. Like, it's like the video released, and people had parties about the video, and everyone is cheering, and everyone's singing along to a song that calls one guy a pedophile. Like, children are dancing to this song, singing along. Like, it almost has so much cultural penetration that there would like entirely inappropriately be like a Kids Bop version of it, right? Like, that's how penetrative the song is. Like people are just saying it's a bop. People love it.
Well, and Amazon had the full Los Angeles concert of all of these acts, and he played it like 6 or 7 times.
Yeah, and he united Los Angeles.
Yeah, Bloods, Crips, everybody. Yeah, we're anti-Drake. Like, that's the whole thing.
We just hate that guy. That's it. We just hate the one dude.
It was remarkable. It's the closest thing to world peace that we've seen. But here's how Drake can make this work for him.
I mean, we discussed this before the show. I know what you're going to say. I don't know about work for him. This is how he can minimize the damage.
Here's how he can profit from this. It was the whole point of the beef included, or one of the points of the beef is that they had people in each other's camps, and Drake famously likes to gamble and likes to gamble a lot of money,
a ton.
What if Drake had somebody in Kendrick Lamar's camp, and he told him what the set list was going to be for halftime show? You can bet on that. You can bet on which songs, you can bet on the order, all of that. So if he just puts down a ridiculous amount of money on the order that he knows like is going to happen, he can at least profit a little bit off of the fact that hundreds of millions of people are going to be watching this moment.
The biggest stage in the world, all united, singing along joyously calling you a pedophile. The worst thing a person can be. Yeah, you could probably rack up a small profit. The problem with this is that he has to have trust remaining in the people he claims are in Kendrick's camp. How can you trust the information that you're getting when you get demolished that readily, that quickly, that completely? And also, if you're that person in the camp, I would just stop, right? I'd be like, oh, well, okay, they can never find out that I was the leaker, so I'm just going to act like I've been here the whole time, that I've been on Kendrick's side the whole time. It's over. I will gain nothing from feeding Drake information. He clearly has nothing to offer anymore. So that's like part of it. Also, it very much seems to be the case that Kendrick definitely had people in Drake's camp, because that's how he released Meet the Grams 30 minutes after Drake released his track. His extremely well-produced track, by the way, Family Matters. He's responding to elements in Family Matters in a track that dropped half an hour after it, right? Like, he clearly has people in Drake's camp, and so you can't, like, he could do the thing that Drake pretended he was doing, which is feeding false information, which, if you think about it, man, like, what kind of Machiavellian plan? This is the second time I'm using that in this episode. What kind of, like, plan, you're pulling the puppet strings where it's like, secretly, this is my Xanatos Gambit. Secretly, I have engineered it so that you call me a pedophile, and that's wrong, and you'll look stupid when it's proven wrong. Like, that's not a good plan. Like, think about that for 2 more seconds, Drake. Like, I know the real plan was to plant the story about the daughter that is supposed to be untrue, but everyone just kind of just accepts as true, even though there's been no evidence. And honestly, I'm there too. Oh, yeah, I'll take it. That's true to me. Like, okay, bad plan, my guy. It seems like that there is kind of like an imbalance of moles among these organizations. So I wouldn't trust that if I was Drake. He also clearly is not making a ton of great decisions. So maybe he does trust that, and the set list that he gets is wrong, which would be the funniest version of the story.
All of a sudden it turns out he's broke after putting down $50 million on this. Yeah. Gaming Nerd Bolsharif asks, for Arif's Astrology Corner, this is my wife's inaugural season as an official self-proclaimed Minnesota Vikings fan.
No, hold on. Before we continue the rest of it, what distinguishes a self-proclaimed Minnesota Vikings fan from any other? Aren't all fans self-proclaimed?
This is as an official self-proclaimed, yeah. She spent the first game looking up astrology star charts for our players, franchise, as well as our stadiums. On a scale
the stadium has a star chart? I am so lost.
On a scale of 1 to 10, how worried should I be that she'll try to use witchcraft too to influence the season and make things worse? That depends if she's a baby witch or if she has grown up.
Right. My hope is that your wife is practiced, I guess, in the astrological arts to know not to mess with Ken beyond her forces. Like, we know that the Vikings are governed by very powerful dark forces that are inscrutable and mysterious. And so attempting to mess with them could come with some pretty dire consequences. And I imagine anyone who's had a lot of experience in that space knows that. So that really kind of depends. Like, you ask how worried you should be. That really kind of depends on your understanding of her experience in these matters. If she's relatively inexperienced, be sure to advise caution and understand that the fandom must be separate from the witchcraft. Otherwise, you'll cross the streams. You don't want that.
If you are looking for more reading material on this, Arif knows of a great bookstore near a sushi place in Northeast that could help you out. A second jet has hit Drew Bledsoe asks, for James's relationship corner, I've recently started dating a person, and they asked me to, quote, mansplain football to them. I know they know nothing about football. Where should I start, and at what point can I introduce the Vikings to them? I want them to enjoy football, but at some point they must know the sheer pain that the game causes. Excellent question. As far as the whole mansplain football thing to them, start slow. That's the best possible option. You're watching the game with them, and just you end up explaining downs first and why somebody's like trying to pass or trying to run in a situation, and then you're going to inevitably have to explain holding, and that's not great. You're probably going to end up having to explain what a catch is. An hour later, you may have to explain like why the line judge is like moving down in a way like this is moving the sticks and everything, but it is possible. It can be done. This is something that may take multiple seasons, but it is very possible to do. You just need to never lose any sort of patience with it.
Yeah.
Ever. Never lose any patience with it. And try your best to remind them that there are other teams. Like, watch other things than the Vikings as well. Like, watch the Vikings, also watch the Ravens, and be like, oh, yeah, this is really fun. Why are we watching the Vikings?
They also wear purple.
Yeah, they also wear purple.
So my contribution to this is that obviously I don't know the dynamics fully of the relationship, but my read of this is that they wanted that because they like it when you talk about the things that you're excited about. And that's kind of the governing principle here. I don't think it's that important that you actually affect, like, obviously you should do your best and try, but there's not really a ton of pressure here because it's not significantly important that you're as concise and as detailed as you need to be to efficiently transmit this information. They're excited about a thing that you're excited about, and they also like hearing you talk, which is great. So I think that's probably the governing principle here. So relax, you're in a good spot. You got to start with the down and distance. So that is like the most important thing. That's the rest does not make any sense without saying, hey, you've got 4 plays to gain 10 yards. That 10 yards can change. We'll talk about that later, but 4 plays to gain 10 yards and you get 4 new plays. Like, that's how that works. And you just keep going from there. The conversation evolves naturally. And because it's a conversation and not like an essay you're writing, it is a back and forth. So they may know things that you didn't know that they knew. And either they like hearing you talk and like hearing you explain things, and they'll let you just say stuff that they already know, or they'll tell you, I already knew that. And you can just move the conversation forward. Yeah. It's great.
And later you're explaining illegal formation to them
for the 12th time.
For the 12th time in the Ravens game. And just like, look, his head's supposed to be at the belt loop. I don't know what to tell you. He's supposed to be moving up. This is dumb. I'm tired of this. And Arif, on this podcast I've been listening to, Arif said that it's okay that the refs are calling this because they need to do this. So they're just going to call it until the refs get sick of it. Yep. Let's go to Don from Ohio, who asks, a difficult question to start. Has CJ Ham's time expired?
That's for you, I think.
Boy, I was watching that fumble to start, and admittedly, that was a textbook like pop out. But I didn't need to see that to be, being like the first pass completed of the season. Like, why?
It was an ill omen. I thought we were in for like a cartoon game after that.
I wasn't totally sold that things were going to go completely sideways, but it wasn't a good look. And I'm wearing my white CJ Ham jersey at the time too. So I'm just sitting there just like, I caused this stupid cursed jersey.
It was singularly you.
It was me, my fault. And then things ended up working out, but I saw a couple of great blocks he picked up.
Mm-hmm.
He got a second catch. It was for like 11 yards.
And he held on to it.
So I don't know necessarily that his time has expired, but I wasn't thrilled to see him fumble the ball to start the game, let alone for him to be the first person to catch a ball. Normally, I would have been excited. Like, really? We got CJ Ham?
We're starting in the CJ Ham era.
Yeah. Nope. That's where we were at. But he does have a final question. I'm going to lean more on you on this because you actually like these things. For James and Arif's, how many cats are too many cats, corner? For whatever reason, the cat distribution system has hit our home extensively over the last few years. We are now up to 4 adopted felines ranging from ages 10 months to 13 years old. Our monthly food bill is over $150 a month, and that doesn't include cat litter or toys. We just dropped another $600 on 2 self-cleaning cat litter boxes. My question: should I consider calling a family member and having them adopt one of the cats, even though the wife and I are very attached to them, or should I kick the wife out of the way so that I can have a more affordable lifestyle?
This is like such a perfectly crafted Don from Ohio question. Like he's at a couple of, but I think this one is like one of the better ones where because he sends them his tweets. So it's like 2 or 3 tweets. And I'm like, what's the twist? This is just like a normal question. And then it ends with that. It's just like, oh my God, man. No, the wife should kick you out, I think.
That's always been our stance.
Yeah, long advocated, actually. Every time you ask a relationship question, from the moment she was a girlfriend in these questions to fiance to wife, we've always been advocating that she should put an end to this business.
And that she can do better, clearly.
Yeah. But also, like, you just dropped $600 on 2 self-cleaning cat litter boxes. That's an optional purchase. You want to spend money on the cats. You're not stretched. This is on you.
Yep, this is absolutely on you. It's your fault. You personally, not your wife, your fault. And you need to come up with a way of making more money. Might I suggest gambling on Kendrick Lamar's set list? Because he's playing Not Like Us at least twice.
Oh, man, I can't wait, dude. That's going to be such a good show.
Well, that is it for this episode of Norse Code. Hope you guys have enjoyed it. We'll be back later this week to preview the 49ers game. Arif, what do you have to plug?
So I mentioned Luke is going to write a piece that is going to be about the Vikings, but is definitely going to reference the Kirk Cousins stuff that I find actually kind of intriguing and very funny. I just wrote a piece about kind of Sam Darnold's ability to force our way into hope, despite the fact that he's like Sam Darnold. Like that's weird, right? So I just wrote that piece. There might be another piece coming up about kind of the scoring drought in week 1 of the NFL. I want to talk about it a little bit more. We'll see. It depends on the statistical tools I have access to and stuff like that. But I think that one's going to be kind of fun. But yeah, stay tuned for more stuff at wideleft.football.
Well, that is it for this episode of Norse Code. Hope you guys enjoyed it. Again, we'll be back later this week. So for Arif, my name is James. Thank you guys so much. And please remember, it's 3rd and 12. You think they're going to run the ball here? God, to me, that hasn't stopped being funny. Apologies if I'm the only one.
That's great.
But we'll be back later this week. Norse Code is the largest and only division of Norse Code LLC. You can find Norse Code on the Daily Norseman, SB Nation's Vikings blog at dailynorseman.com. You can also find it on iTunes, Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, Spotify, Google Play, and wherever fine podcasts are aggregated. Our Vikings blogger extraordinaire and generally useful human is Arif Hassan of... and he can be found on Twitter at Arif Hassan NFL. I am your producer and host, and my name is James Pagashnik. You can find me at the show's official Twitter feed at NorseCodeDN or at my personal account at Big Mono. If you'd like to donate a few bucks to the show, you can do so in a couple of different ways. You can go to patreon.com/NorseCode and donate there. For $3.50 a month, you get bonus material and more. You can also go to paypal.me/NorseCode for a one-time donation, or you can go to norsecode.threadless.com and pick up some Norse Code merch. Any questions or comments that cannot fit in a tweet can be sent to norsecodepodcast@gmail.com. On behalf of the Norse Code staff, we thank you so much for listening.
Our formula is this.
All things are possible through the power of Ben DiNucci.